Hello, it's Tony Blazer. I'm the man behind the Motocross Vault, and I wanted to take a quick second just to tell you about one of the exciting projects I'm involved with for 2021. Last fall, Ken Fott, who was a longtime editor of Dirt Rider, Jennifer Emig, and Grant Langston came to me and actually offered an opportunity to become a partner with a new business venture they were working on, Speed and Sport Adventures. And what Speed and Sport is a high-end opportunity to go on adventure rides with famous athletes from the off-road and motocross community. Our first ride is going to take place in Park City in 2021, and Guy Cooper and Grant Langston are going to be the tour guides for this ride. We're going to be staying at a very high-end resort. You're going to be able to hit the trail with these guys, bench race with them, spend a couple of days with your heroes. I know that kind of thing. It really got me excited. It's something I would love to do. And our first ride will be with Grant Langston and Guy Cooper at Park City. There are 7 slots available at the time I'm filming this. And I'd love you to take a look at our website, get an idea of what we're doing there, and see if it might be something you might be interested in. The website is speedandsportadventures.com. I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like to check it out. You might be interested in going on one of these adventure rides. We'll be expanding this over time, adding new riders and what have you. But I think it's a really, really fun opportunity for somebody who loves motocross and off-road riding. It's not going to be, obviously, a real high, intense ride. It's more like a pleasure-type deal. But I think it's something that would appeal to certainly a guy like me, older. I'm not looking to go kill myself on the bike anymore. But it'd be cool to spend a couple of days with these guys. So, in any case, speedandsportadventure.com. And I appreciate all the support everybody gives me.
Hi, this is Doug Dubach. Welcome to the Motocross Vault.
Hello and welcome back to the Motocross Vault. My name is Tony Blazer, and what this video is going to cover is a look back at how the 250 class of 1984 fared in the motocross magazines at the time. Now, this is a great year for motocross. Motocross bikes were changing hugely year to year, and this is actually a great year for motocross magazines as well. There's basically 4 major players at this time. You have Motocross Action, you have Dirt Rider, you have Dirt Bike, and Motocross, which was one of my favorites. I believe it was a kind of an offshoot of Motocross Action. I mean, really, it seems kind of redundant when you think about it now. Motocross Action is only doing motocross. Motocross was doing motocross. But Motocross went away about, I don't know, 1986, I think is when it finally went away. I used to like reading it, though. It had Ketchup Cox behind it, I believe, if I remember right. And it was a similar magazine, but there was a huge appetite for dirt bike racing and motocross in the early 80s, and the magazines were really, really popular. I loved them. I got all of them. I still have them all back here. Got every issue. And I love looking back at these shootouts, see how the different magazines ranked the contenders at the time. What's interesting is you'll notice that 3 of the magazines only tested the Japanese, and even though there was still a fair amount of European machines, you still had KTM, Husqvarna, even at MStar. They test MStar here in Dirt Bike, which was formerly Mako. They really just didn't, put any mind to. I guess they were considered they just weren't competitive enough. I'm not sure. Maybe there's some political stuff behind the scenes there, but for whatever reason, you don't see the big powerhouses of the 70s by 84 being really even thought of as a serious contender. So that transition happened pretty fast. The Japanese really came on board and squashed all the competition pretty fast. And by the early 80s, really, the Japanese were kind of kings. Now, here in 84, it's not like maybe some of the years later where you'd see one contender wiping the field. There was some, disagreement, I guess you'd say, in who the overall best bike was. Some of that was due to reliability as much as performance. One of these machines you'll see had some pretty serious reliability issues, which kind of hindered its results. But I always love looking back at these things. I love doing the shootouts, and it's cool to see what people at the time thought of these machines. Now, if you like this sort of thing, you can check out my channel for some other shootouts. I've done 5 or 6 other ones of these, including the 1992 250 class. I did one in the 87 80 class, 86, 125, and 250. So there's several other different versions. If you like this sort of thing, you can find them on my channel, including tons of other individual video bike reviews and some even ATV stuff as well. If you're into ATVs, check it out. So if you'd like to support what I do have Motocross Vault merch available. I have all kinds of different designs. I probably have, probably 30 or 40 of them available in my Teespring store at this time, including ATVs, off-road bikes like the classic XRs, all kinds of different motocross machines. I have some retrospectives where I show the evolution of different brands like Honda, Kawasaki, and Suzuki over the years. There's posters, stickers, shirts, all kinds of stuff available. So if you'd like to support what I do and check that out, there'll be a link in the description below and a little card here in the video, and I would certainly appreciate the support. So here, without further ado, is a look back at how the 1984 250 class stacked up in the motocross magazines at the time. The early 80s were an exciting time to be a motocross enthusiast. Motocross technology was moving at an incredible pace, and the bikes were often being completely redesigned after only 1 year on the market. In the early 80s, change was the norm, and complete redesigns were the order of the day. Within the span of 3 short years, the average 250 motocross machine morphed from a simple air-cooled dual-shock sled to a linkage-equipped, liquid-cooled, disc-braked supercross weapon. Of course, the flip side of this breakneck pace was the fact that if you were stuck racing a 2-year-old bike, you were likely left sucking rocks and castor oil. Power plants, suspension, and overall designs were moving at the speed of light, and this put an incredible strain on the smaller manufacturers. Brands like Can-Am, MStar, formerly known as Mako, and Husqvarna were making a valiant attempt to keep pace, but by 1984, the writing was on the wall. The Japanese had set their sights on motocross dominance, and the old world brands looked to be going down for the count. For this installment of the Test Roundup, we are going to look back at the shootout results from Motocross Action, Dirt Bike, Dirt Rider, and Motocross Magazine. These were the premier MX-focused enthusiast magazines in 1984, and they'll give us a good cross-section of the editorial opinions of the day. Of these 4 magazines, only Dirt Bike actually included the Europeans in their shootout. By 1984, the Japanese had a pretty firm handle on the 250 class in motocross, and Motocross Action and the others did not see fit to include KTM, Husky, or MStar in their shootout rankings that season. First up in our shootout rankings is the 1984 Honda CR250R. It finished first in Motocross Action standings, third in Dirt Bike, first in Motocross Magazine, and Dirt Rider ranked it second. For 1984, Honda round-filed their class-winning 83 CR250R and spec'd a virtually all-new machine. The 84 CR featured Honda's first production power valve, which they dubbed the ATAC for Automatic Torque Amplification Chamber, and their first application of a disc brake to the front of the machine. The new bodywork mimicked the look of the Works RC factory bikes and gave the CR the sleekest lines in the 250 class. On the track, the CR's new motor romped on the competition with a broad power band and blistering performance. It was by far the fastest bike of 1984 and head and shoulders above the other machines in stock motor performance. Unfortunately, however, Honda's suspension was not nearly as effective as the motor, and the Red Rooster ranked near the back of the pack in suspension performance. Handling continued to be very good overall, with a sharp feel in the turns and a vicious bit of head shake under deceleration. Reliability also turned out to be a bugaboo for Honda in 1984, with cracked pistons, seized crank bearings, and broken wheels becoming a common problem. Overall, the CR was a blazing fast bike, with Santa looks and crummy suspension. Motocross Action and Motocross thought the Honda was best, largely due to its pony prowess. But Dirt Bike and Dirt Rider were less enamored with its propensity to deliver sore wrists, bruised backsides, and pricey repair bills. Next up, we have the 1984 RM250. In the overall standings that year, Motocross Action ranked it third, Dirt Bike ranked it first, Motocross ranked it second, and Dirt Rider ranked it third. Another all-new bike for 1984, the RM250 adopted the looks of the 83 RH Works bikes. It added a new coat of bright blue paint to spruce up the frame. The new bike sported a completely redesigned chassis and a second generation of Suzuki's award-winning full-floater rear suspension system. In the motor department, the new bike improved slightly on the mellow 83 model with a wider spread and a pleasant delivery, but no overabundance of forward thrust. It was easy to ride, but in no danger of out-dragging the torquey Yamaha or blistering fast Honda to the first turn. By far, the RM's greatest virtue was its suspension, which continued to lead the class by a wide margin. In Dirt Bike's view, the suspension advantage and ease of use outweighed its power deficit. For Motocross Action, Dirt Rider, and Motocross, the RM's excellent suspension was just not enough to overcome its uninspired power plant. Our next contender is the 1984 Yamaha YZ250. This machine ranked second in Motocross Action standings, Dirt Bike picked it second, Motocross picked it third, and Dirt Rider ranked it first. A very solid effort in 1984, the YZ was actually good enough to beat out the Works bikes of the competition for the 84 National Motocross title. When you consider that Rick Johnson accomplished this feat on basically a stock YZ with an Olin shock, a Simmons fork kit, and a porting job, it's an even more eye-opening feat. In stock condition, the YZ provided a brutal low-end power delivery and burly mid-range blast. It was the fastest bike out of turns, but once past the mid-range, the YZ threw out the anchor. Revving it out only made it go slower, and its cranky transmission made selecting the next cog a chore. The Yamaha handled well, with excellent turning manners and a light feel, but its confused suspension package hindered its overall performance in the rough. Fork action was particularly abysmal, and more akin to an undersprung pogo stick than a high-tech suspension component. For most of the magazines, the woeful forks performance, cantankerous transmission, and lack of top end thrust were enough to knock the YZ out of the top spot. Only Dirt Rider picked it as champ, and that was only after their CR grenaded on multiple occasions. The last of the Japanese competitors, we have the 1984 Kawasaki KX250. Motocross Action ranked at 4th, Dirt Bike ranked at 5th, Motocross ranked at 4th, and Dirt Rider tallied it in 4th place overall. The 1984 Kawasaki KX250 certainly does not stand as a high watermark for the green brand. The KX finished last of the Japanese machines in all the shootouts, and even got beat out by one of the Europeans in the dirt bike contest. The last of the rear fender plated quackers, the 84 KX was burdened with a tippy and tall chassis that no one liked, and awkward ergonomics that appeared to be designed for Andre the Giant. The bike was clumsy in the corners, and by far the hardest of the Nipponese machines to negotiate through the turns. Suspension performance was subpar, with both ends bottoming out with a mighty thud on anything bigger than a Wrigley's chewing gum wrapper. Its motor offered a decent pull, but the power band was narrow and hard to use. On the plus side, it did have the most powerful front brake in the class, and a trick Euro-style fender brace, so there is that. Thankfully, better days were ahead for Team Green. The first of our European offerings, we have the 1984 KTM 250. MXA, Motocross, and Dirt Rider did not actually include the KTM in their shootout, but Dirt Bike did and ranked it 4th overall. In 1984, the KTM 250 Motocross actually had a lot going for it. It was the lightest bike in the test at a feathery 213 pounds, and over the course of 7 months it proved the most reliable. Quality components were used throughout, and the KTM's forged pistons last 4 times longer than the cast units found in the Japanese competition. Power was also solid and plentiful, but the delivery was too slow and enduro-like for most testers' tastes. The chassis was stable and great for high-speed off-road use, but it felt long and less enthusiastic in the turns. The suspension was the exact opposite of the mushy Kawasaki, with too much spring rate and too heavy of damping at both ends. The suspension's action was brutally harsh, and the KTM was ranked the worst of the bikes tested by Dirt Bike. With some suspension tuning, the KTM made a great off-road mount, but as a motocross machine, it needed a little work in 1984. Next up of the Europeans, we have the 1984 MStar 250 Supercross. Once again, it was only Dirt Bike that tested the MStar and included it in its shootout. Here it ranked 6th place out of 7 entries. Here we have one of the last gasps of a once proud brand, the 1984 MStar 250 SC. In the early 80s, Mako fell on hard times in America and abroad. Product quality issues led to diminishing sales, and a string of costly lawsuits crippled the German manufacturer's finances. As a result, Mako filed for bankruptcy in 1983. This understandably left the US distributors less than enthusiastic, and when the German manufacturer tried to bring back a restructured Mako in 1984, they were met with a pushback from their former partners. The US distributors wanted the money they felt they were owed and refused to let Mako be sold in the US. As a result of this legal wrangling, Mako sought new distributors and was forced to sell the new Makos as M-Stars here in America. In every other country around the globe, the Makos remained Makos, but in the US, we got M-Stars. As for the quality of the new 250 Supercross, it was actually a pretty decent bike overall. The 84 SC was M-Star's first attempt at a liquid-cooled 250 and was pretty solid overall for a first effort from a bankrupt manufacturer. There was no power valve or fancy disc brakes, but the SC did feature a single shock with a linkage and a modern look. The motor put out a pleasant spread of ponies that pulled well from the mid-range on up. Low-end power was pretty poor, and the bike required a 125 style aggressiveness to keep it on the pipe. In most situations, the M-Star demanded either its rider be in a lower gear than the others, or be willing to fry the clutch mercilessly to keep the German in the meat of its power. In addition to its lethargic low end, there was a grim set of Mako-designed 42mm forks, a poorly set up Olin shock, and a girthy 231 pounds of weight, which held back the Teutonic Terror in the final standings. In the end, the mighty Mako was only better than one machine in the test. Last up of the European entries is the 1984 Husqvarna CR250. Once again, only Dirt Bike rated the Husqvarna, and it ranked at last place, 7th out of 7 entries. Much like its European brethren, Husqvarna was struggling to keep pace with the Japanese in 1984. A full 5 years after the debut of Kawasaki's Unitrack rising rate single shock rear suspension, the Husky was still making do with a set of 70-0 dual shocks. They actually worked pretty well. In fact, they worked better than M-Star, Honda, or KTM shocks in 1984, but they gave the bike a very antiquated look and a wide layout. Liquid cooling finally made its debut in 1984 on the Huska, but the new motor still pumped out a very old-school dose of power. Like the MStar, the Husqvarna was badly overweight, and it was only 1 pound lighter than the gravitationally challenged German. On the track, the Swede was the slowest bike in the test by a Nordic mile, and incapable of outpulling even a well-tuned KX125. It was slow to rev, and happier plowing along through the pine trees than blasting berm shots. The suspension was good, if a bit soft, and the bike handled well, as long as turns were not in your vocabulary. Like the KTM, it made a much better off-roader than a motocrosser, and unfortunately, it was no threat to the cutting-edge Japanese bikes in 1984. So there you have it. That's a look back at the 1984 250 class and how the motocross magazines at the time thought they fared. I think my interesting takeaway to this is that even though the Japanese were very dominant, over and above what the Europeans were doing at the time, they were clearly not perfect. I mean, most of those bikes had serious problems. I mean, all bikes in the 80s need a little work. The Honda was the fastest machine, but they had all kinds of problems with reliability pretty much across the line that year. In 85, they added a bridged exhaust to all the machines. Actually redid the cranks as well. They replaced these plastic separators with metal ones that are more reliable to address a lot of those problems they had in 84. The bikes were great in a lot of ways, but I know a lot of people had some mechanical issues with them. And then the Yamaha, I had an 85 Yamaha, and it was a rocket. The bike was super fast, but good lord, the suspension was terrible. So even though they were maybe better than like Husqvarna, which really was more so like an enduro bike at that point, really wasn't much of a motocross machine. None of these machines were perfect by any means. By modern standards, they were all probably really hunks of junk, but at the time we loved them. They're great machines. You only know what you know. So if you like this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe, share it on social media. If you could ding the bell, tell your friends, I'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to see something done in the future, again, leave me a comment in the section below. If I haven't done a bike, if I have the information on it, I'll be happy to try and put a video out in the future. I have a ton of them always in process, so it does take me a while, but I promise I'll get to everybody's request there. So until we meet again, this is Tony Blazer with Motocross Vault. Keep the rubber side down. Peace. Hello, this is Tony Blazer for the Motocross Vault presented by Blinzall. If you're in the market for some high-quality racing oil for your 2-stroke or 4, make sure you go to blinzall.com and use our discount code VAULT20 to save 20% at checkout. Thank you for all the support.